Great Shot.
Oh gosh, this is the Great Shot Podcast, brought to you by Cracked Racquets. My name is Alex Gruskin, and the man who brought you probably the most questionable Hey Great Shot in the history of this podcast, who is joining me as my co-host not only today, but maybe for the entire weekend. We'll see. We'll let you and Rothman duke it out, but it is Cracked Racquets founder and CEO, contributor to the website, just tennis personality extraordinaire. It's our very own Dalton Thieneman. Dalton, hey, great shot.
Howdy, howdy. Thanks for the articulate introduction there. But first and foremost, I do want to mention this is my second official time on the podcast. We had our first experience at the Gruskin Estate, and it wasn't, audio ready, and to say the least. However, it's a debate on how that first intro went with the Great Shot. I've been practicing that for months now.
Well, I have a lot of stories to say about the first time we recorded together, but before I do that, I do want to give a special shout out to our producer who is in studio today. In the background, you must be so familiar with his voice by now, or at the very least, I am so familiar with his voice because he's always telling me what I need to improve on. It's our very own Daniel Westhoff, CTO of Cracked Racquets. Daniel, hey, great shot. Thank you for joining us today. But yeah, so getting back to that first time, let's see. We're still working out. This is what, our second time all in person together.
Yeah,
we were all together.
Surprisingly so. But do you want to give a quick shout out to where we're at, because we're lucky enough to be in a nice setup, and it looks very official.
Don't try and hijack. This is my show, all right? You come on one time, you think you can just do that. No, of course we will give a shout out, but I do want to get back to the original story. So the first time we recorded, there were a lot of hot takes in there. It was late November, right around Thanksgiving. I'm trying to think, what was the big story? I think Jack Sock had just won Paris, and so there was a lot of mayhem, and then Laver Cup was around then. But even worse than that, what do we do on the very first time I meet Dalton in person? Obviously, we go out, we have a nice night, we get back, it's like 1:30, 2 a.m., then we record, right? And if you've listened to a Great Shot podcast, we can record for hours at a time. And so by the time we're done recording, it's 3:30, 4 a.m., and, I'm trying to impress Dalton. He's my new boss with quotation marks around it. I'm putting air quotes if you see the video. And so I'm like, I'm going to stay up with this guy. Whatever he wants, I'm going to provide for him. So Dalton, of course, and this is at my house, he sees we have a ping pong table. And he goes up to it and he goes, hey, we're all tennis players. He's like, let's play a little ping pong, sure. And Fliegner and I are passed out. We're ready to go to sleep. And he's like, no, we got to play a couple games. So Fliegner and I literally just, our bodies are vessels for Dalton. It was just short of him putting up the other side of the table. Played ping pong with him for 2 hours from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. Just the most ridiculous thing you've ever asked of me. And so, that's why you were banned from the Great Shot Podcast.
Well, so you tell this great and, articulate story. A lot of details here, and then you leave out the best part. Not only did I, take care of business on the ping pong court against you, but also Max Fliegner, man.
Well, can we point out the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that we were trying to impress you? Then they always say, let the boss win, and that is exactly what we did.
That's the opposite of competition, baby. Come on, we talked about this.
That's very true. Well, in terms of competition, Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic at Spruce Peak, we'll have to compete with the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which is where we're at now. That's how you do a professional segue. And just, before we get into Stowe Mountain, obviously it's going to be an incredible event, but we do want to give a shout out to the Mandarin Oriental team. Just such nice facilities. They're letting us podcast here, gave us a room. It's really beautiful. Go check it out, the setup. I think you posted an Instagram picture as opposed to actually participating with me when we interviewed the Wolves earlier today. So
shout out to the Wolves.
So typical Dalton, but still really nice setup. So thank you to them. Thank you to your fiance, Hannah Bodkin, for letting us stay here at not the most unreasonable price. So again, shout out to the whole idea. But okay, let's get to, the reason we are at the Mandarin Oriental, the reason we are recording in Boston, and the three of us are all together, is we are headed to the Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic held at Spruce Peak in Vermont this weekend. We've been talking about it for months, and it is finally that time. 7 of the 8 players have been announced, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of like that there's that extra thrill when we get there. For all we know, it could be Nadal. Nadal says, I'm taking Toronto off, or I'm taking Cincy off. Maybe I want to come to Spruce Peak now. So I like that little added thrill. But very excited for this event. We've been, promoting it and just being excited to be here, again, for the past at least 6 months. So my first question to you, Dalton, coming into this weekend, just in terms of the grand scheme, what are your expectations? Because this will be our first time at this event.
Sure, expectations are sky high, absolutely, from the pictures that we've been posting for our listeners our viewers. We've been posting nonstop, so obviously you are in tune with the Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic at this point. But I think the biggest expectation is just the scenery of Stowe, Vermont, the placement of the court being right around the vegetation and the wildlife. I mean, hey,
they don't call it Spruce Peak for nothing.
Yeah, what else do you want from a tennis tournament? But more than anything, I want to shout out to Grand Slam Tennis Tours for making this happen for sure, and the tourism company that's actually based out of Stowe that specializes in travel, tennis travel to major tennis events around the world. So shout out to Grand Slam Tennis Tours for making this happen, and obviously reaching out to us and making us the official podcast of the Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic, but also one of the premier sponsors at the event this year. So excited
I brought you on today's podcast so you would say all the business that I wouldn't have to. Completely agree with everything you said. Again, if you haven't followed along, you probably all know this, but Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic, it's a smaller event. We're only having 8 guys this year. This is their second event. Their first one was put on last year where they had 6 guys, I believe. I think last year they had who? Ramos Vinoles, Jared Donaldson, Tommy Haas, Vasek Pospisil, Jesus. Jeremy Chardy, Francis Tiafo, and I feel bad because we're videotaped, so now people know I had to read that off my computer and didn't memorize it, but still, really impressive field. And then this year, they bring it to a whole nother level. So obviously, if you're not going to take our word that this event is fun, Francis Tiafo coming back for a second year, I think that's him showing how much he enjoyed this. Then you bring in guys, Dennis Kudla, Yoshihito Nishioka, Bradley Klahn, Noah Rubin, Maximilian Martyr, Roberto Bautista Agut, and as we mentioned, that mystery 8th man. Maybe they'll let me play. Let's hope they let me play. I think I'd put up a good fight.
Yeah, I think you would be a great addition for the 8th spot. There's one remaining. Westhoff is back here, hasn't played tennis in a little bit, but I think it's just like riding a bike. So we get him out there, it'll be great.
My first scenario to you, if they let the 3 of us play as one player on the court, can we beat Francis Tiafo? Like, how would we do in the tournament?
No, absolutely not.
Because he smacks. I'd be like, where would we locate
He still smacks us. Regardless, he still smacks us. But
dude, all I know is you're not allowed to hit any backhands because I saw your backhand swinging it.
Regardless, this is one of the first. I mean, we've met 4 or 5 times at this point, but most of our listeners and viewers don't realize that this is a production and with Cracked Racquets, it's all over the phone. Thank God for technology in the digital space, because otherwise we are not in the same city. So this is nice that we're finally able to do this in person, but also the fact that we're going to have an opportunity to play a 3 out of 5, and I'm going to look that. You're done. You're done, Gruskin.
I was going to say, where are you going with this, Ray? I don't know what you're saying about Stowe, but yes, we will. Again, for fans, if you want to come a little bit early, you may catch me and Dalton playing 3 out of 5 on the court. So that's another reason to head up to Stowe this weekend. But so let's preview this event a little bit. Absolutely. Because, again, we just mentioned the field. So many good players. You got a guy like Bradley Klahn, who qualifies in Toronto, qualifies in Cincinnati, wins the U.S. Open main draw wild card. You've got Francis Tiafo, top 50 in the world. I mean, Roberto Bautista Agut, top 50 in the world. So many talents at this event. And again, it's a smaller draw. It's 2 groups of 4, and they're going to play round robin. And then I believe 2 people emerge from each group, and then it'll be semifinals, finals, carried out from Sunday to Wednesday of next week. Just in general, in terms of the flow of play, what do you think fans should expect to see from this weekend in Vermont?
Sure, yeah. Well, so you've already mentioned kind of the breakdown of the draw, the tournament overall, the players themselves outside of that last remaining piece, and I think that's going to really be a huge factor in how this plays out. So keep looking out on your social media feeds at my tennis ticket on Twitter, and then also on Instagram as well for Grand Slam Tennis Tour.
Are you going to say anything tennis related?
But
or is it all business?
I'm getting to it. But I've heard some rumors out there. The rumor mill is flying for that last player. I think Sir Andy Murray has been mentioned a few times. Stan Wawrinka, and then potentially Taylor Fritz. So if we can get one of those 3 or just anybody else, I mean, the field's already loaded. But for me, for those who aren't familiar with the event, the Stowe Mountain Lodge Classic is that perfect gap and that perfect preparation for the U.S. Open next week, and it's a little more laid-back environment up in the hills at Stowe. But also, I mean, this is a substantial event. I think they're expecting a pretty large crowd each day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then through the final on Wednesday. But This is an event that is only in its second year, but this is an event that tennis fans should block out on their calendar for years going forward.
Well, when we talked to Kyle, who is, if not running this event, but certainly very much involved, and again, Kyle Ross, right? I don't want to butcher his last name, but I believe it was.
You
Kyle
interviewed
Ross.
him.
Yeah,
You're looking at me. You
That's
interviewed
very
him.
true, but yeah, you're the business guy. I assume you have all the answers. It is Kyle Ross, but the big thing he mentioned about this event, and the big thing I want to stress to anyone who's considering going, because I believe there are still a few tickets available, is that this is going to be a different experience than the Cincinnati tournament we were just at. Cincinnati, you're just bombarded with tennis. There's courts everywhere. There are players everywhere. Whatever you want to see, you got to go look after it in Cincinnati because there's so much there, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. I would say, going off of my experience, that was the biggest takeaway I learned, was that a lot of the times it was, I see Dennis Kudla's at 4-1 in the third. I got to go watch the end of his match, or Bradley Klon, who, again, both these guys happen to be here this weekend. Klon's about to finish, 7-6, 7-6 in his final round. I got to get to that court so I don't miss the ending of that.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I am most excited about in terms of this week's tournament, and again, Kyle stressed this, so much interaction between fan and player. It sounds like it's a much more intimate setting. There's only one court of play, so we're not going to be scatterbrained. You are really going to be able to lock in on the action. And then just the relaxed nature of the event. No, this isn't an ATP event at this point, and I'm not trying to imply that these players will be tanking, because of course they won't. They're not, they're not going out there. They don't show up on a tennis court and waste time. You don't get that good at tennis by just wasting your time out there. But they will certainly be trying to put on a show and trying to entertain more so than they would at, say, a final round qualifying at Cincinnati, where there's so much pressure on the line there. So I'd say that's the thing I'm most looking forward to.
For sure. And before I get to the point that I'm most looking forward to, have to plug tickets.
Another one.
That's my role here. So www.stowetennis.com. Go grab the tickets. Sunday, August 19th through Wednesday, August 22nd. Tickets start at $29. So go get that, especially if you're in the northeastern area and you have access. You could drive a few hours to Stowe. It would be well worth your while. But in terms of the actual play itself, I think it's going to be, like you mentioned, Cincinnati. You get the interactions with the top players, but it is a little crowded. It is a little chaotic. But Stowe, you're going to get that same level of interaction, but you're also going to have the relaxed nature. You're going to have the entertaining factor. But I also think the players are going to try extremely hard with the U.S. Open days away. This is part of their training routine and their training cycle. So it's not like they're going to be throwing matches by any means.
It sucks, too, because I know that Stowe's got a lot of great sponsors lined up. And, again, Kyle talked about how great the food's going to be, the drinks. They've got Lake Champlain chocolates. If we don't show up and get a box.